Happy midsummer. It is I, the OGGM, going for an afternoon walk. As we often do with these walks, we discuss various RPG topics that bubble up to my limited imagination. And since we're celebrating Origins and we're celebrating, actually I think that's for me. We're celebrating Free RPG Day. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, we're revisiting videos I've made in the past, and for us to see if my opinions have changed. Yeah. So, following the theme of dungeons, we did what is a dungeon, what is a mega dungeon. Now we need to enter the next category. What is a funhouse dungeon? And you may have heard this term before, or you may not. It's not as used as much as it was. It's very much a gonzo 80s concept of dungeon design, where basically the dungeon is just pretty ridiculous. It takes the normal general ideas of dungeons, monsters, traps, and just pushes them to ridiculous. Sometimes ridiculousness for the sake of deadliness, like Tomb of Horrors, and sometimes ridiculousness for the sake of just being ridiculous, like Mud Sorcerer's Tomb. And then of course you have the pinnacle, the most referred to funhouse dungeon, which is White Plume Mountain. So what makes a funhouse dungeon different than a normal dungeon? Because on the surface, White Plume Mountain, which many consider one of the, if not the best, or at least the most referred to, on the surface, it's a pretty simple dungeon. There's only 3 ways you can go. Each way leads to a mini boss who you fight to get a magic item from. It's a pretty simple, straightforward run, with probably accomplished in like an hour or 2 if it wasn't just so ridiculous. But because White Plume Mountain asks the question of, well, what if? What if you're just an all-powerful wizard and you have the ability to do all these ridiculous things? What's stopping you from doing it? So White Plume Mountain has tons of things you'd find at an amusement park, which is thus the term funhouse. It's got an anti-gravity room, it's got an infinity vortex, it's got a log flume, it's got skill challenges where you have to hop across lava, it's got a weird inverted pyramid filled with monsters for no reason whatsoever, it's got an underground cave where you have to fight a giant albino crab, again for no reason. Did I mention that it has a log flume? It has a log flume ride. Why does it have a log flume ride? There's absolutely no reason for it to have a log flume ride. What, if anything, does a log flume ride have to do with anything about a dungeon? Nothing whatsoever. That's the whole point. A funhouse dungeon, which should be rare, because if they're not rare, if you use them all the time, they become monotonous and they just become as boring in any other dungeon. The funhouse dungeon has to be like a once in a lot, once rarely, and there usually has to be a lead up. White Plume Mountain, there is a lead up. It's a ridiculous lead up, but there's a reason. And I guess sort of there's a reason why it's ridiculous. You have to read it and understand it was a different time. It was a different time. Now, could you do it today? Sure you could. I mean, especially with the impetus of D&D role-playing towards safe, happy, comfy, you could make a party, ridiculous dungeon. And it could be unbelievably deadly, or it could be safe. And the tools are there in current D&D to have a funhouse dungeon. But even if you were to embrace that idea, first and foremost, it should be rare. So I think if we're going to go down the steps of what makes a funhouse dungeon, it can't be a regular occurrence. It's got to be something special. Like If you're lucky enough to be running a continuous campaign for a long period of time, it should be like something that only shows up once a year, once every other year, maybe as a one-time holiday. Now, obviously, if you're just running it as a one-shot, like at a convention or something, then that previous statement doesn't matter. But so that's the first thing. If you're going to establish one in your game, it has to be rare. You know. Second, you have to justify the fact that it is going to be ridiculous, and the all-powerful wizard or interdimensional entity is a perfect MacGuffin to explain it. Now, obviously, you don't have to explain it too heavily, because the magic loophole allows you to justify the ridiculousness. But still, you know, if we're using Asarak or however you pronounce his name, as the premier Funhouse dungeon builder, you know, there's a reason Asarak, whatever his name is, does what he does. There's a reason why he built Tomb of Horrors, why he built so many Tomb of Horrors, why he built the Tomb of Annihilation. It's explained in his motivations in Tomb of Annihilation why he does these things he does when he could have done something else, you know. So using him, because he's already established, is a perfect. But if you don't want to use him, you just have to use the same. That's a perfect motivation, you know, that whoever it is who has built it because they've reached a level of power where they just can, you know, at the point where they're just like, there's nothing stopping me from being this ridiculous. I want a roller coaster. I'm putting in a roller coaster. I want a mirror maze in my dungeon. Why? Because I can. Who cares if it's ridiculous or not? I don't care. I don't even care if nobody ever sees it. I'm just building it because I can. You have to have that idea that this wasn't built to serve a purpose, like, say, a tomb or a jail or orc bunker or anything. It was built simply because somebody had reached a level of power where they could, and they were bored, and they wanted to see what they could get away with, you know. So that's the second thing, is when you're understanding that it's going to be rare, shouldn't happen very often, it should be keyed to something like a holiday or an epic quest. And second, that you have to establish the parameters that when you players go in here, expect it to be just ridiculous. Expect there to be things you wouldn't see in a normal dungeon. Expect it to either be extremely deadly or extremely silly, or perhaps combinations of both. And the third is it's got to be worth it, you know. Going through White Plume Mountain, you know that those 3 epic artifacts are waiting for you at the end, and 9 out of 10 times the people don't return them to the guys. They keep them, right? But you know that there's a reward. Tomb of Horrors, not so much, but still, it's the reward of surviving Tomb of Horrors. And there are some pretty cool things hiding in Tomb of Horrors, but really Tomb of Horrors is just a, can we survive? There is the implicit idea built in that if you're going to risk going through this ridiculous, over-the-top dungeon that serves no purpose whatsoever, there's got to be a reward. There's got to be a reason for me to jeopardize my character, because Funhouse dungeons are usually, but not always, but usually deadly. So let's go back to White Plume Mountain, because it is, and we'll just go through the examples of how it's basically, you know, if you look at it top down, it's a pretty average dungeon. Straight line, 3 different choices, each leads to a very limited amount of space where there's only a few things. I think there's only like, what, 25 encounters total in White Plume Mountain, right? It's 1 level. You have a very specific reason for going there, and a specific reason for accomplishing the mission and returning the MacGuffin items. You even have a time frame. You've got to do it within X or else. And you have the challenge. I challenge you to get these magic items back for me, because I'm a wizard and I'm bored. And I built this challenge-full dungeon to see if you could survive it. It's a test. I'm testing you. If you make it all the way through, you've proven you're worthy of capturing these items and returning them to their rightful owners. Unless you follow my theory that White Plume Mountain is an insurance scam. But that's a separate video. Alright, so the very first thing, depending upon which version of White Plume Mountain, is the entrance. Now, you got one version of White Plume Mountain where you've got the three monkeys outside, you know, blind, deaf, dumb. Which entrance do you go through? You've got the other one where you have to go through the waterlogged tunnel to find the submarine door that opens, that takes you down. And then the next thing you encounter is the I don't know what you call them, the doors, the metal doors that you can only go through one way, that you see at amusement parks, right? And then you've got Enid the Sphinx, the bedraggled Gyno Sphinx on her little island, and surrounded by this volcanic water. And she's got her little island, and she asks you riddles, and she's got her little wand of force, and every time you pass her you have to answer a riddle. But notice the only way she has of defending herself, other than her innate Gyno Sphinx powers, is a wand of force, a non-lethal magic item. She's got a few other tricks up her sleeve, but in an out-and-out fight, Enid would probably lose. So she relies on trickery, illusions, and the fact that she's got the wand of force. And she can lower the barriers if you answer her riddles. And she makes the riddles relatively easy. Even the example one, when you hear it, is like, oh, I know what that is. All right, so then you get your three choices, right? Only three choices. Now, choice one to your right, there's a few minor things, but basically it leads to the classic wooden planks hanging from chains over the bubbling, boiling pool of molten lava, molten mud that randomly geysers up. And at the very end, of course, is this little teeny room where the only dwarf vampire in history hangs out, guarding the first item. You're jumping across these jangling, slippery trash can lids that are hanging from chains. The vampire could pounce on you at any point in time and just knock you off. Missed, swipe, done. He doesn't. He waits. Maybe he takes a couple pot shots with you at you from his crossbow, but basically he waits, you know. And what do you get if you beat him? You get the artifact that you have to return. What was the best part of that? Going across, the funhouse part, the ridiculousness of swinging across those vines and coming up with different unique ways. Unless, of course, somebody just goes, I cast fly. There's nothing in there that, you know, covers things like the utility belt of stuff that your typical party would have. Things, oh, just blah, 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 build a bridge, blah, 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 fly, blah, blah, blah. But even if you're doing all that, the vampire should, if he was being tactical, attack you. He doesn't. Maybe he shoots his crossbow, but mostly he just waits. He knows he's gonna lose. But he's not there to beat you. He's there to perpetuate the idea that this is a fun house. Then you've got the second choice if you go straight. And that's where you get the ghost crab. And that's where you get the log flume ride. There's a log flume ride in White Plume Mountain. And you go through it, and at the end you have to fight this guy, Sir Bluto Sans Piat, a famous 8th level fighter who's wanted. Why is he there? No reason. Not part of the story. Why is there a log flume ride? No reason. Not part of the story. Has nothing to do with why you're there. It's just there because the wizard could. And then you got to fight the ghost crab, this giant bone white crab in the center of a caldera, surrounded by water, boiling hot water, that the only thing separating you and it from certain death is a thin wall of force membrane that could easily be pierced if the white crab rolls the fumble, sploosh, suddenly everybody is just cascading in boiling hot water. How do you get out? I don't know, but it just so happens that the crab is guarding the magic item that would allow you to get out. Now there's a million better choices the wizard could have come up with to guard this magic item and test the players if he wanted to, but no, he chose something ridiculous, a giant crab. Did I just see a mountain lion? And then you get the third and final choice where you have your vortex tube and your anti-gravity pinball room, and then you have the inverted ziggurat, and then at the bottom of the inverted ziggurat, in a room, is the final encounter, the guy who's guarding the magic item everybody inevitably wants, Black Razor. Now at any point in time, that dude could take you out. He's got Black Razor. He has the ability to go after you with Black Razor. He doesn't. He waits. He waits for you to go through the gauntlet of these monsters, most of which are harmless. Once you figure out their pattern, you don't even have to fight them. You're just like, okay, all right. It's only the thing at the bottom, the wyverns that are shooting their little, not wyverns, whatever the one that shoots tail spikes, the manticores. But how often can manticores shoot tail spikes? Once, twice. And again, the odds are you're in favor because they're at the bottom of the ziggurat. The chances of them hitting you, pretty slim. But unless, you know, you figure out the patterns of the other levels, you go down, you deal with the manticores. There's the guy, and he's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to give too much away. By the way, Black Razor. And then you leave. And sure, you know, the mysterious voice says, oh, you're leaving without that. I'm summoned some wandering monsters. But it's by then, you have the 3 MacGuffin items. So again, you could easily cakewalk the monsters and return the magic items to the individuals that hired you. I've never heard of anybody who returned them. Now, since White Plume Mountain was published, there have been multiple iterations. They've even done second levels. They've done stories to explain it. None of them are as good as the original because it imagines a whole ridiculous world where there's all sorts of other things going on. Dead Knoll's eye socket. There's a whole campaign. And all of it is just as sort of Looney Tunes as White Plume Mountain. Nothing that has ever gone on since then has ever been able to really recapture the magic of White Plume Mountain. And why is White Plume Mountain ridiculous? Why is it the perfect example of what makes a Funhouse dungeon? Because it's a rare occurrence. You go in knowing that you're going to encounter over-the-top ridiculousness between the challenge that the wizard lays down and the time frame given to you, and the fact that the very first thing you see is something like, what? You know this isn't a normal dungeon. This is a rare and special thing, and because it's rare and special, it justifies the ridiculousness, because the wizard admits, I'm bored. I want a challenge. I want to challenge you. I've stolen these things because I could. Come get them. If you survive, you've earned them. And then that's it. You never know what happens to him or the items or the guys who hired you to get the items. It's just sort of left vague. And yeah, sure, they revisited it in magazines and stuff after that, but it never had the same magic. Because people tried too hard to make it a normal adventure. Oh, the second level of White Plume Mountain. It's like, no. It's not goofy, okay? If you're gonna use a Funhouse dungeon, again, the 3 things. 1, it has to be rare. It has to be, you know, like a holiday event, a one-shot, something that only happens doesn't happen all the time. If it happens all the time, the magic is lost. The second thing is, you know, the justification. How do you justify this ridiculousness? And thankfully, there is a built-in safety cord to justify it, because you could always just use the justification of he was bored. Why did he build it? Because he could. And third, what's my reward? Because, you know, if there's no reason for me to go there, why would I go there? Even you know, in real life, if we go to a fair, if we go to a funhouse, if we go to an amusement park, if we're willing to jeopardize that much money, you know, it's because we want to have fun. We want a memorable experience with our friends. We want a story that we can share, and we want to bring back some tat, right? We go to the fair and we spend $20 to play the fair games to win a prize that would have cost us $1. That, you know, I got my big stuffed bear. You know, you go to Disneyland and you pay $100 for something you could have gotten for like $10. But you do it because it's Disneyland. You do it because it's fun, because it's there. And that's what defines a funhouse dungeon. So there you go. There's the third of my what is a. We've now explored what is a dungeon, what is a mega dungeon, and what is a funhouse dungeon. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a better example? Let me know. I'll talk to you later.